Using a variety of moss in a terrarium creates wonderful colour contrasts and textures which are extremely satisfying. In this video, I'm going to show you how to make a terrarium using only moss and a little lava rock as a hardscape material. A terrarium planted like this is also known as a mossarium. I want to start by saying that I'm not an expert with mosses, so I may have a few of the names wrong here. Feel free to leave corrections in the comments. A special thank you to Moss Clerks for sending me many of the types of moss I use in this video. You can buy moss from them by clicking the link in the description. Here are the types of moss that I'm using. Polytrichum formosum, bank haircap moss. Climacerium japonicum, Japanese tree moss. Theridium tamariscanum, tamarisk moss. Dicranum margus, greater fork moss. Dicranum scoparium, mood moss or broom fork moss. Leucobryum glaucum, bun or cushion moss. And I have no idea what this moss is, but it came with my bun moss. And I'm not entirely sure what these species of moss are. Here are the tools that I'm using. A chopstick, curved tweezers which are good for getting into tight corners, scissors for cutting stuff. I like using a paintbrush to firm in moss as it doesn't do any damage to the leaves. Curved scissors, long handled straight tweezers. This is the container that I'll use. You can buy the exact same one by clicking the link in the description, and I will get a teeny tiny commission if you do, so thank you. Substrate, hit the link in the top right corner to see how I make mine. And last but not least, one of the handiest things in my toolbox, my trusty little jug. Here is the lava rock I'll be using, which is the same stuff that's used in gas barbecues. I sifted through the packet and picked out the most interesting rocks. It is quite dusty though, so I always clean it before using it in a terrarium. Here's how I make the terrarium. First, I use the jug to add some substrate into the container. You may notice that the substrate is rather gritty, and that's because it's predominantly made from bonsai materials like akadama, lava rock and molar clay. There is also coir and vermicast in there too. I use the paintbrush to arrange the soil on a gradient so it's higher at the back and lower at the front. This is a simple way of adding a sense of depth and scale to the terrarium. At this point, I always spray the substrate with water. This stops it moving around too much during planting. Give it a wipe down so you can see what you're doing. I like to use a microfiber cloth. Now it's time to place the rocks. I always use odd numbers when placing hardscape materials, or even when planting plants, as it looks more natural. Avoid symmetry. I place the two large stones at the back, slightly out of line with each other, and the smaller stone completes the scalene triangle. I drop smaller lava rocks on the surface to further add to the natural look. As these are so small, it doesn't matter if an odd or even number of them are used. I give the rocks a light spray before planting. Notice how the colour changes. I only have a vague idea in my head, and I often create this way. I just like to start and see where my mind takes me. First, this unknown piece of moss is placed in the bottom left hand corner. It's good practice to lightly firm it in place so the moss is fully in contact with the substrate. This beautiful piece of bank haircap moss was taken from my friend's private woodland garden. It's important that you don't go and take moss from the wild, as this is damaging to the ecosystem and can land you in trouble with the law. Check out your garden, friends' gardens, plant pots, rooftops, or just order it in. I split the bank haircap moss and place it behind the piece of lava rock at the back. I always seem to start in the corner and make my way inside, totally subconscious by the way. To further create a natural look in your terrarium, it can help to mix up moss species so they blend with each other. This dicranum margus is an amazing moss species, but it's quite long. I cut it down to size before planting it in the terrarium. I squeezed this just in front of the bank haircap moss. I like the colour contrast of the three mosses that I've used so far. As this bank haircap moss is a tall species, it naturally lends itself as a background plant in this terrarium. And as I was planting, this little springtail came out of nowhere. I'm always delighted when I see one in a terrarium. Best of luck to you. There is a little path that has naturally formed between the rocks and mosses, and I think I'm going to leave it there. A single strand of dicranum is added at the back, only because it fell on the floor and it caught my eye at that moment. This tamarisk moss is super delicate, but it's lived happily in another terrarium for a good few months. I placed it here because I like the way it looks against the rock. Here's a larger piece which I plant next to the rock too. It fills a large space in the terrarium and I really like its texture. The terrarium is starting to take shape now. This random piece of star moss came in with my dicranum, so I placed it between the two moss species to add some interest. Adding numerous species of moss in an area within a terrarium keeps things looking natural and less uniform, and I like to do that. This beauty is Japanese tree moss and it's gifted to me by a student. I think it will struggle to stand out in this terrarium, but I'll add it anyway, and hopefully once it gets bigger it should be a real focal point. Mosses don't have a root system and take all moisture from their immediate surroundings, which make terrariums a great choice for growing them. This little woodlouse also came out to say hi. Here's more of the tree moss. This small piece will be placed further forward than the larger ones. And this medium piece will complete the triangle of tree moss. As I'm adding this bit of dicranum, something didn't seem right to me. Clearly, the smaller lava rock pieces don't look right here, so I remove the moss and move the lava rock. I find it helps to have as little of the substrate or drainage layer visible from the front view, as that doesn't always look good. Planting on a gradient helps this, and I think this looks much better. I'm going to fill in some of these gaps with more moss. And back here, a single piece of tamarisk moss seems to work well. The last area to plant is the bottom right hand corner. I don't want to overplant this area and create a totally green carpet throughout the terrarium, so I'll make sure bits of the soil are visible through the moss. Thankfully, the bonsai mediums look really good and add some character to the build. I can't imagine that a coir or compost surface would be nearly as effective. I'm unsure of the botanical name, but this Asian moss species was gifted to me by Harry Hutchinson of Unknown Tropics on Instagram. He has loads of cool plants, so go check his page out. The moss has grown slowly in a larger terrarium I had, but I thought it would look better in this one, so I divide it into two pieces and plant them in between the other species of moss. I like the slightly yellow tinge to this moss. time for the final few touches. A light spray for the mosses, and this little mossarium is complete. Care should be easy for this terrarium. As I mentioned before, mosses don't have a root system, so as long as the terrarium is humid and airy, and I'll make sure to open it frequently, then it should be happy. I'll post an update for you guys soon. I'll sit it under a grow lamp on my desk so I can keep a close eye on it. I'm really pleased with the final outcome. It's amazing what you can do with a few different types of moss. If you'd like to discuss this or any other topic further, come join my Facebook discussion group. It's called Terrarium Group and the link is in the description below. Thank you for watching and I'll see you in the next video.